why you care so much what others think. You hesitate before posting a photo, speaking up, or even sending a simple message, not because you don't know what you think, but because you're already imagining how others might respond. That split-second pause reveals something important. Other people's opinions can start to feel more important than your own voice. This experience is extremely common. Most people assume they are just overthinking, but what's actually happening runs deeper than that. Your brain is weighing social consequences in the background, even in situations where nothing serious is at stake. What makes it more confusing is that logically, you know most judgments don't matter in the long run. Yet emotionally, they still carry weight. This gap between logic and feeling is where anxiety and self-doubt often begin. Understanding why this happens requires looking at how the brain evolved, how you were shaped growing up, and how modern life constantly amplifies social evaluation. Section 1. The social brain. At a biological level, humans are built to be social. For most of human history, survival depended on being part of a group. Isolation wasn't just uncomfortable, it could be life-threatening. Because of this, the brain developed a strong need to stay connected and avoid rejection. This survival system is still active today. Your brain treats social approval as something important, even when the situation is harmless. That's why criticism, awkward interactions, or even subtle signs of disapproval can feel emotionally intense. Neuroscience shows that social rejection activates brain regions associated with physical pain. In other words, being excluded or judged doesn't just feel bad. Psychologically, it can actually register in the body as discomfort or stress. The challenge is that modern life no longer operates in small tribes. Instead, you are exposed to constant evaluation from large, invisible audiences, especially online. Your brain is still trying to track belonging, but the scale has become overwhelming and unclear. Section 2. Early conditioning. From a young age, people learn that approval is connected to value. Praise from parents, teachers, and peers teaches you what behavior is acceptable and what leads to positive attention. Over time, this creates a mental link between being liked and being good. If you were often rewarded for being quiet, successful, polite, or easy to manage, those traits may become part of how you believe you must behave to be accepted. On the other hand, criticism or punishment can create a lasting sensitivity to disapproval. These early experiences shape an internal system that constantly evaluates your actions. Instead of simply asking what you want or believe, your mind may default to asking how others will respond. As you grow older, this conditioning doesn't disappear. It becomes automatic, influencing decisions in subtle ways, even when there is no authority figure directly present. Section 3. Fear of rejection. At the core of caring too much about opinions is fear of rejection. Humans are wired to avoid exclusion because, historically, being left out of a group meant losing safety and support. That instinct still exists, even though the consequences today are rarely that extreme. This fear often shows up in everyday behavior. You might soften your opinions, avoid disagreement, or adjust your personality depending on who you are around. These patterns are usually unconscious and feel like being easygoing, but they can also come from a desire to stay accepted. While this can help you avoid conflict in the short term, it can also create long-term tension. When you consistently filter yourself, you may lose clarity about what you actually think or feel. Over time, This can make relationships feel less authentic because you are managing impressions rather than expressing yourself fully. Section 4, the social media amplifier. Social media has intensified the need for approval by turning social feedback into constant measurement. Likes, comments, and views act as immediate signals of acceptance or rejection, even when the content itself hasn't changed. This creates a feedback loop where visibility becomes tied to value. A post that performs well feels validating, while one that doesn't can feel disappointing or personal, even though the response is often random or algorithm-driven. Another issue is comparison. You are constantly exposed to curated versions of others' people's lives, which can make it seem like everyone else is more successful, confident, or accepted than they really are. Over time, the environment strengthens the habit of looking outward for validation. Instead of relying on internal judgment, your brain starts using external metrics to measure worth. Section 5, low self-esteem trap. When self-esteem is low, external opinions carry more weight. If you don't fully trust your own judgment, you naturally look to others to confirm whether your thoughts, choices, or actions are correct. This can show up in behaviors like overthinking conversations, over-apologizing, or avoiding risks that might lead to criticism. These actions are often attempts to reduce uncertainty about how you are perceived. The problem is that this creates a cycle. The more you rely on external validation, the weaker your internal confidence becomes. And the weaker your confidence becomes, the more you depend on outside approval. Eventually, other people's opinions can start to feel louder than your own inner voice, even when they are inconsistent or irrelevant. Section 6, breaking the cycle. Breaking this pattern doesn't mean you stop caring about people entirely. It means shifting from external approval as your main guide to internal values as your reference point. This shift begins with awareness, noticing when you are making decisions based on fear of judgment rather than personal belief is the first step toward change. Small actions help retrain your response system. Section 6, breaking the cycle. Breaking this pattern doesn't mean you stop caring about people entirely. It means shifting from external approval as your main guide to internal values as your reference point. This shift begins with awareness, noticing when you are making decisions based on fear of judgment rather than personal belief is the first step toward change. Small actions help retrain your response system. Expressing an honest opinion, setting a boundary, or sharing something imperfect gradually builds tolerance for disapproval. Each experience teaches your brain that rejection is uncomfortable, but not dangerous. Over time, the guiding question changes from, will they like this? To, do I respect this choice? That shift slowly returns control to you instead of the imagined audience in your mind. Conclusion. Caring what others think is a deeply human trait rooted in survival, learning, and social structure. It is not a flaw. It is an old system operating in a modern world. But while the tendency is natural, it doesn't have to control your decisions. When you understand where it comes from, you create space between impulse and action. In that space, you can begin to choose differently. And over time, those choices build a life guided less by approval and more by intention, clarity, and self-trust.